When you finally decide to rewrite your standards, something inside you breaks and something else is born. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's not some Hollywood moment with the perfect soundtrack. It's quieter than that, almost uncomfortable. It's that split second where you look at your life and admit, for the first time with honesty, I've been settling. And that truth hits you harder than any criticism anyone else could ever give. Because deep down, you always knew you were capable of more. You just got used to living beneath what you were built for. We all do it. We slip into routines that numb us. We tell ourselves, this is just who I am, or maybe life is supposed to be like this. But when you reach that moment where the mirror doesn't lie, when you look at your choices, your habits, your results, and you feel that sting, you realize something heavy. It's not the world holding you back, it's your standards. The bar you set for yourself became your ceiling, and every time you said it's fine or I'll do it tomorrow, you added another layer to that ceiling. Rewriting your standards is emotional because it forces you to face the version of you that's been hiding, the one who accepted less love than they deserved, one who tolerated disrespect because they didn't believe they could demand better, the one who stayed comfortable because discomfort felt like failure. You start to see all the tiny decisions that led you here, the promises you didn't keep, the boundaries you never set, the dreams you pushed aside because fear dressed itself up as logic and you believed it. What makes this shift real is that it doesn't happen with excitement. It happens with grief first. You grieve the years you lost playing small. You grieve the opportunities you didn't chase. You grieve the energy you wasted on things that didn't feed your future. And then you get angry, not at others, but at the version of yourself that let life decide your value. That anger is not destructive, it's fuel. It pushes you to say, I'm done living like this. That is when the rewriting begins. Raising your standards isn't about becoming perfect. It's about refusing to live at the level of your excuses. It's about deciding that average effort is no longer acceptable. It's about holding yourself accountable when no one's watching. It's about saying no to things that drain you, even when it feels uncomfortable. It's turning your back on the easy path because you're tired of easy giving you empty. When you rewrite your standards, you start showing up differently. You speak with more intention, you walk with more purpose, you feel more connected to who you're becoming. And people around you notice. Some will be inspired, some will feel threatened, some will leave. And it hurts, but it's part of the process. You start to understand that not everyone can come with you where you're going. Not everyone was meant to sit at your next table. You stop begging for support from people who never believed in you in the first place. Then something unexpected happens. You start trusting yourself again. You start believing your voice, your decisions, your direction. You wake up in the morning with a different kind of pressure, not the pressure of surviving, but the pressure of becoming. You're not chasing validation anymore, you're chasing growth. You're not avoiding hard things, you're choosing them because you know they shape you. There is a moment, just a small one, where you feel pride return to your chest. Not because you've reached the top, but because you finally stopped lying to yourself. You finally stopped asking for permission to evolve. You stopped pretending you are powerless. Rewriting your standards means you stop accepting love that leaves you empty. You stop tolerating habits that destroy your focus. You stop making excuses that keep you stuck in the same cycle. You stop sacrificing your future to protect your comfort today. Instead, you commit to the version of you who's been waiting, a version that's disciplined, hungry, aligned, and unapologetically honest. And the crazy part, no one will understand the shift at first. They'll think you're acting different. They'll say you've changed, and for once, they'll be right uh, because you're no longer available for the life you outgrew. This is what the 1% challenge is really about, not doing the impossible, but refusing to keep living like the possible is out of reach. It's choosing every day to lift the bar just a little bit higher, to expect more from yourself, to demand more from your time, your energy, your relationships, your purpose. You rewrite your standards one decision at a time. One morning you get up when you don't feel like it. One moment you choose discipline over comfort. One conversation you refuse to avoid. One opportunity you say yes to instead of shrinking, and slowly your life starts to move in a direction that feels honest, like you finally stepped into the version of yourself you were meant to be all along. That's how it starts. Quiet, uncomfortable, real, and absolutely life changing. The 1% mindset doesn't look glamorous from the outside. There's no crowd cheering you on, no applause, no sudden transformation. It begins in a place most people never see, inside your own head, in the quiet moments where you feel torn between who you've been and who you're trying to become. It starts with a small whisper, just a little better today. And honestly, that whisper feels almost too small, too weak, because the world teaches us to chase big changes, big moments, big leaps. But the truth, the real shift happens in the smallest steps. The ones nobody notices, the ones you almost don't notice yourself. That's what makes the 1% mindset uncomfortable. It forces you to slow down and face the parts of yourself you usually avoid. The habits that have become automatic. The stories you tell yourself so often that you forget they aren't facts. The cycles you repeat not because they serve you but because they're familiar. When you start trying to improve by just 1%, those things suddenly become visible. You begin to feel the weight of every choice, every reaction, every moment of hesitation, and it hits you. Change doesn't come from one, it comes from doing a little better consistently. There's something emotional about realizing how much control you actually have. It's overwhelming at first. You look at your life and think, if I can get better by 1% today, why didn't I start earlier? But that's the thing, you weren't ready earlier. You didn't believe small steps mattered. You thought change had to be dramatic to be real. You thought you had to overhaul your entire life at once. But now, slowly, you're learning that tiny improvements compound, they stack, they collect. And over time, they turn into something you never thought you could create. The 1% mindset asks you to let go of perfection. That's hard for people who've spent years feeling behind, years comparing themselves to others, years believing they'll never catch up. Trying to change too much at once is a way of hiding from the fear of failure. But improving by 1% requires you to actually show up. It requires you to face the day as you are and still choose growth. It's raw, it's human, and it's honest. You might not feel proud every day. Some days 1% feels like nothing. It feels like you're barely moving, but that's where the emotional truth hits. You are moving. And maybe for the first time in a long time, you're moving forward instead of in circles. You start to see that growth isn't about speed, it's about direction. You start to understand that a small win is still a win. Waking up 10 minutes earlier matters. Drinking water instead of grabbing junk food matters. Choosing to focus for 5 minutes longer matters. Saying no to distractions matters. These tiny acts might not impress anyone else, but they start to rebuild something inside you. Your belief in yourself, the 1% mindset becomes powerful when it reaches your identity. You stop telling yourself you're lazy or broken or inconsistent. You stop carrying the weight of all your past failures. You begin replacing those narratives with proof, small, undeniable evidence that you can change, that you are changing. You look at yourself differently. You begin to hold yourself differently. Your voice inside gets stronger. You become more patient with yourself, but also more accountable. You start demanding more from your day because you know you're capable of more than you used to give. People around you might not understand what's happening, they might not see any big differences yet, but you feel them. You feel the shift in your energy, you feel the shift in your intentions, you feel the shift in the way you react to things that once triggered you. You feel the shift in your discipline, not perfect discipline, but growing discipline, real discipline. And there's a quiet pride that grows with it, something deeper than motivation, something more permanent. Eventually, you start to crave that 1%, not because it's easy, but because it's real. You start waking up thinking, how can I become just a little better today? You're no longer trying to impress anyone. You're trying to honor the promise you made to yourself. You're trying to build a future that matches your potential. And it's emotional, deeply emotional, because becoming your best self isn't about ego. It's about healing. It's about proving to yourself that you didn't survive everything you went through just to stay the same. The 1% mindset teaches you that greatness isn't born from massive jumps, it's born from tiny steps, steps that feel too small to matter until one day they add up and you realize you're not the same person anymore. You're stronger, you're steadier, you're more disciplined, and you did it without forcing a miracle. You did it by showing up for yourself, one decision at a time. That is how the small becomes powerful. That is how the little becomes life changing. That is how the 1% becomes the difference between who you were and who you're becoming. Discipline over motivation is one of the hardest truths to swallow because it forces you to admit something you don't really want to. Your feelings can't be trusted. You wake up one day full of energy, full of fire, ready to take on the world, and the next day that fire is gone. It's replaced with doubt, heaviness, excuses, and that quiet voice saying, just do it tomorrow. Motivation is fragile like that. It's emotional, it's unpredictable, and if you build your life on it, you build on sand, one bad morning, one rough week, one setback, and everything collapses. But discipline is different. It's cold. It's steady, it's not exciting, it doesn't care about your mood, your fatigue, your insecurities, or your reasons. It's the part of you that shows up anyway. The part that says, I don't feel like it, but I'm here. And that version of you, the disciplined version, is the one who becomes unstoppable. This truth hits deep because most of us grew up thinking we needed to feel ready before we could move. We learned to wait for inspiration, for clarity, for the perfect moment. And every time we waited, life kept moving without us. We lost opportunities not because we were incapable, but because we let emotions lead. Discipline forces you to confront how often you've held yourself back, not because you lacked ability, but because you lacked consistency. There's something raw and human about this realization. It's painful because it makes you look at all the times you knew exactly what you needed to do but didn't. All the mornings you stayed in bed. All the plans you postponed. All the goals you let drift away. Not because you didn't care, but because in those moments, comfort felt safer than commitment. And slowly, without noticing, you built a life around avoiding discomfort instead of pursuing growth. The emotional weight of discipline comes from the identity shift it demands. It's not just about building habits, it's about becoming the type of person who doesn't negotiate with themselves. It's about looking in the mirror and deciding you're done lying to yourself, done saying tomorrow, done hiding behind feelings. You realize your future doesn't need more excitement, it needs structure. It needs routines you follow even on the days you feel empty. But discipline doesn't start big, it starts painfully small. It starts with dragging yourself out of bed when your body wants to sink deeper into the mattress. It starts with showing up to the workout you promise yourself even when you're tired. It starts with opening the book, the laptop, the journal, even when you don't want to. And every time you choose action over emotion, something inside you strengthens, something inside you heals. You begin to trust yourself again. That trust is emotional because somewhere along the line you stop believing your own promises. You've set goals before and quit. You've made plans and abandoned them. You've told yourself stories about the kind of person you want to be, but your actions didn't match. Living like that breaks something inside you quietly. It's not dramatic, it's slow erosion. And discipline is the way back. It's the repair process. When you start choosing discipline, you feel resistance, real emotional resistance. Not because the task is hard, but because you're breaking patterns that have protected your comfort for years. You're teaching your mind a new identity. We don't quit anymore. At first, it feels unnatural, like you're forcing yourself into a version that doesn't fit. But day by day, it starts to feel like home. You start craving structure. You start depending on your habits instead of your feelings. You start noticing small results, subtle changes in your energy, your confidence, your posture. And here's the part that hits the heart the hardest. Discipline is love. It's self respect in action. It's doing what's necessary because you see value in your own future. It's choosing the uncomfortable thing because you believe you're worth the effort. People think discipline is punishment, but it's the exact opposite. It's protection. Protection from regret, protection from wasted potential, protection from becoming someone who looks back at their life and sees nothing but almost. There will be days when you want to quit, days when you question why you're pushing so hard, days when you think no one notices, no one cares, no one understands how much you're fighting. And that's when you realize something powerful. Discipline is a lonely path at first, but it's also the path that separates the ones who dream from the ones who build. In time, the emotional struggle turns into emotional strength. You start feeling proud of the person you're becoming. You start seeing results that motivation alone could never give you. You become more grounded, more stable, more confident, not because life got easier, but because you got stronger. And that's the truth about discipline. It doesn't make the journey lighter, it makes you heavier, heavier with purpose, heavier with resilience, heavier with belief. You stop chasing motivation and start creating momentum. And once you reach that point, you become someone who doesn't wait for the right moment. You create it. Someone who doesn't hope for progress, you force it. Someone who isn't defined by how they feel, you're defined by what you commit to. That's when everything changes. That's when you finally realize discipline isn't the enemy of freedom, it's the gateway to it. Pushing past comfort daily is not about being strong all the time, it's about being honest. Honest about the fact that staying comfortable is slowly killing your potential. Honest about the truth that comfort feels safe, but it's the same safety that traps you in routines that don't grow you. People think breaking limits looks heroic, but the reality is much more human. It's messy, it's emotional, it's filled with moments where your mind screams stop even while your heart whispers go. Comfort is seductive. It tells you that you've done enough for today. It tells you that you don't need to try harder. It tells you that failure is scary, risk is dangerous, and growth can wait until tomorrow. And when you listen to it long enough, it becomes the narrator of your life. You start choosing easy without realizing it. You start avoiding anything that stretches you. You start protecting your pride instead of testing your strength. You stay the same even when staying the same hurts. Pushing past comfort daily is emotional because it forces you to confront what you've been avoiding, your fears. Not dramatic fears, but quiet ones. The fear of not being good enough, the fear of trying and falling short, the fear of disappointing yourself again. These fears don't scream, they whisper, they convince you to shrink, they convince you to play small. And every time you choose comfort, those fears get stronger. But something powerful happens the moment you choose discomfort on purpose. Something shifts. It's not immediate confidence, it's more like a trembling step forward, a small act of rebellion against the version of you that kept you stuck. That moment is emotional because you realize you can do hard things, not all at once, not perfectly, but you can start. And starting is where your life begins to change. When you push past comfort, you learn things about yourself that comfort hides. You learn that you're stronger than you thought. You learn that most of your limits were mental fences, not actual barriers. You learn that fear doesn't disappear. You just get better at moving through it. You learn that courage isn't loud, it's quiet. It's the decision to do what scares you even with shaking hands. Some days you'll push yourself and feel proud. Other days you'll push and feel like you failed. That's part of it. Growth doesn't follow a straight line. It comes with frustration, doubt, tears, and moments where you question if it's worth it. But the reason pushing past comfort works is because it builds something deeper than motivation. It builds resilience. It teaches you to endure. It teaches you to trust yourself in the middle of stress, uncertainty, and difficulty. It shows you that you don't break as easily as you once believed. What makes this journey emotional is that you start to notice the difference between pain that drains you and pain that grows you. Comfort drains you quietly, it slowly steals your ambition. Growth pains you honestly, it stretches you in ways that create space for new strength. And for the first time, you begin choosing the pain that builds instead of the comfort that destroys. You begin noticing small victories. The workout you didn't want to do but finished anyway. The conversation you were scared to have but said anyway. The goal you avoided for months but finally took one step toward. These small acts feel insignificant in the moment, but they begin rewiring your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who avoids hard things. You start seeing yourself as someone who leans into them. The people around you may not like your shift. When you push past comfort, you stop fitting into the small version of yourself that others were used to. Some will admire your growth, some will distance themselves, some will try to pull you back. Not because they hate you, because your growth forces them to confront their own comfort. That's emotional too. You learn that evolving requires letting go of people who want you to stay the same. But the greatest transformation happens inside. You begin developing a kind of inner power that comfort could never give you, a quiet confidence, a grounded self respect, a strength that doesn't need to be proven to others because you feel it in your bones. You wake up knowing you can handle what comes your way. Not because it's easy, but because you've trained yourself to do hard things daily. Pushing past comfort doesn't mean you never feel fear or doubt. It means fear and doubt don't own you anymore. You still feel them, but you move anyway. And that movement is what separates who you were from who you're becoming. Growth doesn't happen in the comfortable moments, it happens in the uncomfortable decisions, the ones that feel too small to matter, too difficult to choose, too painful to face. But every time you choose discomfort, you choose a stronger future. You choose a life built on courage instead of fear. You choose a version of yourself that you can trust. And over time, the discomfort that once scared you becomes the fuel that empowers you. Because you realize something life changing comfort is safe, but you weren't created to live safe. You were created to become, to rise, to break limits that once defined you. And every day you push past comfort, even just by a little, you step closer to the person you are always meant to be. Protecting your time and energy isn't just a productivity strategy, it's an emotional transformation. It's one of those decisions that forces you to realize how much of your life you've given away without even noticing. You start looking at the places where your time went, the people who drained you, the habits that distracted you, and it hits you. You weren't tired because life was heavy. You were tired because you kept letting everything and everyone have access to you. Focus like a champion isn't something you wake up with. It's something you grow into after years of being pulled in 1,000 directions. It begins when you get honest about how scattered you've been. That's an emotional moment because it shows you the truth. You weren't unfocused because you lacked ambition. You were unfocused because you gave your attention to things that didn't deserve it, people who didn't value it, situations that didn't grow you, conversations that didn't move you forward. There's a quiet pain in realizing how much time you've wasted trying to please people who would never do the same for you, how many days you lost because you were trying to fix problems that weren't yours, how much mental space you sacrificed replaying old situations, old arguments, old mistakes. You start to feel the emotional weight of all those hours, all those moments you'll never get back. And then something inside you shifts. You look at your time and your energy like they're sacred because they are. You stop saying yes to everything. You stop letting guilt make decisions for you. You stop carrying emotional responsibilities that don't belong to you. You start choosing peace over approval, clarity over chaos, purpose over distraction. Protecting your time is emotional because it often means disappointing people who got comfortable with your availability. They were familiar with the version of you who said yes out of kindness, fear, or habit. But when you start valuing your focus, you stop operating from guilt. You stop stretching yourself thin. You stop bending to make others comfortable while you break inside. And when those patterns shift, people notice. Some respect it, some get offended, some fall away. But all of it is necessary. Focus is expensive. It costs relationships, habits, and comfort zones. You begin cutting out noise. Even when that noise is familiar, you start recognizing that not everyone deserves immediate access to you. Not every conversation is worth having. Not every opportunity is meant for you. Not every argument needs a response. You learn that silence is a strategy, distance is a form of self respect, boundaries are a form of healing. And once you establish boundaries, you start feeling lighter, more grounded, more in control. You begin noticing the difference between people who drain you and people who fuel you, between activities that waste your time and activities that build your future, between emotional reactions and intentional choices. It becomes almost heartbreaking to recognize how much chaos you tolerated simply because you didn't protect your own peace. You see how easily your focus broke in the past, how a single text, a single distraction, a single thought could pull you off your path. Now you start to reclaim that power. You put your phone down, you walk away from drama, you build routines that support you, you create environments where your best self can breathe. The emotional part of this journey is understanding that focus is lonely at first. When you start prioritizing your energy, you spend more time with yourself, and that can be uncomfortable. You begin hearing the thoughts you used to drown out with noise. You confront fears you once avoided. You sit with your dreams long enough to realize how much work they demand. But that silence, uncomfortable as it is, becomes the birthplace of clarity. Slowly, you start loving that silence. You start craving the consistency that once felt restrictive. You begin feeling proud of yourself for choosing progress over distraction. You realize that all the things you thought you lacked discipline, confidence, drive weren't missing at all. They were buried under exhaustion and overstimulation. And then comes the breakthrough. Focus becomes your power, not your struggle. You stop being pulled by everything happening around you. You start moving with intention, purpose, and alignment. You start waking up with clarity instead of anxiety. You start acting like someone who knows where they're going. And that energy, it changes your life. People who used to distract you can't reach you the same way. Situations that once bothered you barely touch your peace. Old habits start losing their hold over you. You become more selective, more deliberate, more aware of what builds you and what breaks you. Protecting your time and energy transforms you into someone who doesn't just chase goals. You protect the space required to achieve them. Someone who doesn't just want greatness, they make room for it. Someone who stops allowing the world to dictate their pace and starts creating their own rhythm. That is when you finally feel what it's like to focus like a champion. Not because you're perfect, but because you've learned to protect the parts of you that matter most, the parts that fuel your growth, the parts that carry your future, the parts that were always powerful even when you weren't paying attention to them. Building unshakable consistency is one of the most emotional battles you'll ever fight because it forces you to confront every part of yourself you've tried to outrun. It's not about routines or checklists. It's about rewriting the story you've lived inside for years. The story that told you you always quit, that you're not built for long term discipline, that you don't finish what you start. Consistency demands you face that narrative and prove it wrong one day at a time. And that is deeply human, deeply vulnerable work. The truth is, inconsistency isn't caused by laziness like people think. It's caused by fear, by wounds you never dealt with, by the belief that if you don't try too hard, you can't fail too deeply. Some part of you got used to stopping early as a form of protection. You avoided going all in because going all in meant risking disappointment, risking judgment, risking the possibility that your best still might not be enough. That emotional weight is real. It follows you every time you try to start something new. So, when you decide to build consistency, you're not just creating a new habit, you're breaking an old identity. And breaking an identity hurts. It feels like tearing away the version of yourself that's kept you safe for years. You fight against comfort. You fight against old patterns. Fight against the voice that whispers you've never stuck with anything before, and on some days that voice sounds louder than your goals. But slowly, quietly, you start showing up anyway on the days you feel motivated and on the days you feel nothing at all. On the days where everything flows smoothly and on the days where everything feels like dragging your body through mud. You show up in ways nobody sees, nobody celebrates. And it's those invisible days, the ones where you push through the emotional heaviness that build the strongest version of you. Consistency becomes emotional because you begin to notice changes, not just in your results, but in your spirit. You start trusting yourself again. You start believing that your promises actually mean something. You start feeling that your goals aren't just fantasies, they're reachable because now you're someone who takes steps instead of giving excuses. There will be moments where you slip, moments where life hits you unexpectedly, moments where old habits try to drag you back, and those moments can feel like you're failing all over again. But then, for the first time, maybe in your entire life, you choose not to quit just because you stumble, you get back up faster, you restart without shame, you continue without punishing yourself. That's when you realize the truth. Consistency isn't about never falling, it's about refusing to stay down. The real emotional shift happens when consistency stops feeling like discipline and starts feeling like alignment. You begin to crave the version of yourself that shows up daily. You crave that structure. You crave the pride that comes from doing what you said you would. And you realize the work wasn't about forcing habits. It's about unlocking the version of you that always wanted to rise. Consistency teaches you patience. You learn that overnight results were never the point. You learn to appreciate small progress, tiny improvements, subtle shifts in your behavior. You learn that growth is quiet before it becomes loud. And somewhere along the way, you start feeling grateful for every small step because you know it's those steps that are building your future. And then there's the emotional part nobody talks about, losing people. When you become consistent, you stop matching the energy of people who live in chaos. You stop entertaining conversations that derail your focus. You stop being available for drama, excuses, or cycles that drain you. That distance scares some people because your consistency highlights their lack of it. They say you've changed, and they're right. You're becoming someone who chooses purpose over distraction. The loneliness of consistency eventually turns into strength. You learn to enjoy your own company. You learn to sit with your thoughts without escaping them. You learn to build your life with intention instead of reaction. And the more consistent you become, the smaller your circle gets, but the stronger you become. There comes a moment when you look at yourself and realize you've changed without even noticing. Your habits are different, your mindset is different, your energy is different. You aren't the person who quits anymore. You aren't the person who doubts every move. You aren't the person who breaks your own promises. You're someone reliable, someone steady, someone who honors their goals, their time, their boundaries, their future. Someone who's finally living in alignment with the potential they always had. Unshakable consistency isn't built by perfection. It's built by courage. Courage to keep going, courage to try again, courage to believe in a version of yourself you haven't met yet. And every day you choose to show up, you come closer to becoming that version. That is the real reward. That is the real transformation.